Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's AAHAM webinar, How to Stop Stress from Killing You. At this point, I'd like to introduce our speaker for today, Professor Pete Alexander. Pete, if you're ready, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, everyone, for attending. So based on the title of the presentation, stress almost killed me. You know that feeling of being mentally and emotionally overwhelmed? That was me back in 2008. It was a perfect storm of stressful activities that culminated in my diagnosis with stress-induced diabetes. Yet, I didn't listen to my body about what stress was doing to it. Instead, I continued to burn the candle for another 10 years until I ended up in the emergency room with a severe case of diabetic ketoacidosis. For those of you who don't know, that meant that my body was actually eating itself alive because of my stress. And the doctors told me I was 1 hour from being comatose. And that is not a unique story. Let me tell you about my friend Ken. Ken and I, we met in high school, and we supported each other as proud fathers. We served as each other's best man at our weddings. We were very close. Fast forward 30 years, and Ken ended up in the emergency room as well because of his stress. And in his case, it was with intestinal cancer. And the doctors had to remove over 2/3 of his intestines. And then he had to undergo chemotherapy. And in between chemotherapy sessions, we would always talk either on the phone or in person. And pretty much every time, Ken told me he was absolutely convinced that stress caused his cancer. So during the next several minutes, what I'd like to do is talk to you about why you should care about stress, how you manifest stress. I'll introduce you to the Lighten model for foundational stress relief, and then we'll get into the real fun of it. And that's going to be several activities that I'm going to have you do. You're just sitting there at your desk or wherever you are watching this presentation, walking you through different techniques that you can use on your own. And then I'll wrap up the two stories before opening it up for questions and any other details that you would like. So why should we care about stress? Well, the two stories that I started with obviously show what stress can do to an individual. But from a more global standpoint, the World Health Organization calls stress the #1 health epidemic of the 21st century. And obviously, I don't have to tell you that COVID's been getting a lot of attention and has been for the last 6-7 months. However, that hopefully will be past us in, sometime next year. But you have to think about it. What is COVID causing? It's causing us all stress, more work, maybe isolation, whatever it happens to be for each individual. Bottom line is it's causing stress. And so the WHO continues to call stress the #1 health epidemic of the 21st century because it's not going anywhere. COVID hopefully will. And how do you know that you're manifesting stress? Well, we manifest stress both mentally and physically. Mentally could be through a lack of concentration. Instead of being able to focus, your mind's wandering because there's other things on your mind. Could be mood swings, so you go from happy to sad or angry at a moment's notice. Maybe you're having panic attacks that you never had before, or you're anxious about a future event. Maybe it's prescription drug and or alcohol addiction. Any or all of these are indicators that you're mentally stressed. Physically, could be frequent colds. Maybe instead of one cold a year, you find that you're getting one cold every month or every couple of months. Back and shoulder stiffness is usually the first sign of being physically stressed because we tend to hunch over at our desks when we're stressed. Digestive disorders that no amount of Pepto-Bismol or other medication seems to help with. Maybe you're reaching for an Excedrin bottle every day or every other day instead of occasionally because you're getting these headaches constantly. And weight fluctuations, either gaining or losing weight rapidly. In fact, right before I was diagnosed with my stress-induced diabetes, the my weight went down. I lost 30 pounds in 30 days. And at first, I thought it was fantastic. I mean, I was in my mid 40s and the weight was coming off. I wasn't doing any special dieting. And yet the weight kept on coming off. And so after that 30th pound came off, I decided to get my blood work done. And sure enough, there's diabetes for you. So all of these are ones that your body is telling you something is wrong and you really need to listen to it. And where do we manifest our stress from? Well, you probably can figure that most of our stress these days is mental. But what you might not realize is that most of our stress is self-induced. We do it to ourselves. And during the research that I did for my book, I found that there were 7 areas where our stress manifests itself from. And that's our livelihood or our career, our imagination or our conscious mind, our genius or our unconscious mind, our health, the time we have available, our environment, and our network of relationships. I'd like to touch on each of these briefly before we get into the fun activities. So, our livelihood, our career. We are likely to spend more time at work than doing just about anything else. And many of us with workaholic tendencies will work more hours than we sleep. Given the enormity of time involved, we really need to have 1 or 2 techniques that can help get more balance in our career endeavors. Our imagination, our conscious mind. It's only 5% of our brain, but it's where our inner critic lives. It's where our control freak lives. It's also where our creativity lives. And we absolutely need to be creative when we come up with a solution to a stressful situation. Our genius is our unconscious mind. It's the other 95% of our brain, and it's basically your autopilot. It runs your body 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you ever got behind the wheel of a car and drove from point A to point B and had absolutely no recollection of that drive, that was your unconscious driving. It's where your memories are stored. It's where your habits are formed. It's where your perception of the world lies. And it's actually where real change happens. Your health, which is the inspiration for what I do today. If you don't have your health, nothing else matters. If you don't believe me, think about the last time that you were really sick. Did you feel like doing anything other than lying in bed? Probably not. And when you're in that state, you're no good to your career, your job, your business, your spouse, your kids, whoever. So be careful with your health. Definitely take care of it. Time is another precious resource. With time, though, as we all know, once it's gone, you can't get it back. And that's why it's so important to take action today. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, right now. Because if you can even find one technique that you can do for maybe 1 minute a day, 2 minutes a day, the compound benefits over time will be enormous, but you have to start today. Your environment is critically important, whether it's at work, if you're at school or at home. You need to be able to have an environment that's supportive of your stress relief efforts. So if you're working on a particular project, your chances are you're going to probably need some silence. You need a comfortable place to sit, minimal interruptions, and understanding from those around you. So make sure that that environment is supporting your efforts. And finally, our network of relationships. The people in your life matter. When you're stressed, you're less patient, you're more irritable, and less able to listen or show interest and empathy. Don't take your relationships for granted. Make sure that they're in alignment with the other aspects of the Lighten model. And with that, we're going to get into the fun stuff because that's all the setup. But before I start walking you through these techniques, I want to ask you to please turn off your phone, your email, maybe your Slack notifications, whatever that might ping you during these activities. The reason is because if you let your notifications distract you, you won't get anything out of these activities. So make sure those are turned off, because I'm going to have you actually do each one of these activities on your own. And the first one is called visualization. And what I'd like you to do is close your eyes and take a deep breath. And I want you to imagine a place that you like to go to relax. Maybe it's the beach, maybe it's the park, maybe it's a lake, maybe it's your backyard, maybe it's the spa. Wherever it is, go there in your mind and start taking in all of your senses. What do you feel? Do you feel the sun on your face? Do you feel the sand or the grass under your feet? What do you smell? Do you smell the fresh air? Maybe the lotion from the spa? And what do you hear? Do you hear the wind blowing through the trees? Or maybe the water splashing on the shore? What do you see? Do you see the blue sky? Or maybe the green of the trees or the grass? Whatever it is, take all of your senses in and take another deep breath. And open your eyes. It's a simple 1 to 2 minute activity that you can do to help ground yourself at any moment. The next activity I like to call Don't Try to Control the Uncontrollable. And it's human nature that anytime that we are faced with a stressful situation, we tend to worry about all aspects of it, both what we can control and what we can't control. So let's take COVID, for example. We can't control things like the government response. We can't control the fact that maybe our kids can't physically go to school right now, or we can't even control the person next to us wearing a mask necessarily. So those are all things that would fall under the uncontrollable side. But what can we control? We can control wearing a mask ourselves and wearing it properly. We can wash our hands regularly. We can keep 6 feet social distancing. And we have full control of our own mindset as how we're going to respond to the situation. So in any stressful situation, approximately 50% of our brain will go to, or mind share will go to the uncontrollable side, 50% will go to the controllable side. If we say, okay, the things we can't control, let's just put those aside. Let's not even worry about those. And focus on what we can control. So if we don't worry about the uncontrollable side, most of that mind share can be focused on the controllable side. And if we focus as close to 100% of our mind share on what we can control, what happens is when we feel like we're in control and we can affect change, our stress goes way, way down. So try to focus on only what you can control in a stressful situation. You will be amazed at how much better you will feel by focusing only on what you can control. The next activity has to do with fear. And if you recall earlier, I mentioned that most of our stress is self-induced. And that stress is typically based on fear. And fear is actually a 4-letter acronym for fictional evidence appearing real. I'll repeat that. Fictional evidence appearing real. We tend to worry so much about what something might be, instead of just worrying about, once again, what we can control. And this often gets us stuck. So let's think about a time maybe where you wanted to go for a promotion, or maybe you wanted to do something that physically you didn't think you were able to do, and you talked yourself out of it based on that fear. Instead, if you were to be faced with a situation like that and you really did want to move forward in that situation, try asking yourself this question. What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? Instead of being stuck, that question opens up the world of possibilities. What it does is it gets you thinking about things that are possible. And when you start thinking about things that are possible, you start moving forward. And often, if you're going for something that you've never done before, that's going to be uncharted waters. You're stretching yourself. And inevitably, you're going to run into a speed bump because it's a place you've never been. You don't want to let that make it feel like it's a setback, because typically when you're going into uncharted waters because you're stretching yourself in your ability, it's only, the universe giving you feedback on your way to success. And it all starts with that question, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? The next activity is personal values. And personal values is what's important to you, how you spend your time, and how you evaluate the use of your time. So I'm going to help you professionally elicit your personal values as it relates to your career. And you'll need a pen and paper for this, or if you don't have a pen and paper, you can certainly use like a Word doc on your computer. Just make sure that the notifications are still turned off so that you're fully focused on this activity to get something out of it. So before you start writing or typing anything, what I'd like you to do is close your eyes, because I'm going to ask you for 3 scenarios in your career. The first scenario, I'd like you to think of a time as it relates to your career when you were most happy. Most happy. Who were you with? What were you doing? And what was the event? The second activity or time in your career is, I'd like you to think of a time when you were most proud. Most proud. Who were you with? What were you doing? What was the event? And the last one I'd like to ask you is, as it relates to your career, think of a time when you were most fulfilled. Most fulfilled. Fulfilled. Who were you with? What were you doing? And what was the event? Now that you have those 3 times in your mind, I'd like you to open your eyes, and I want you to write down or type as many 1- and 2-word answers to the following question. What's important to you about your career? What's important to you about your career? As many 1- and 2-word answers. what else is important to you about your career? And what else is important to you about your career? Once you have at least 5 answers, what I'd like you to do now is rank those by putting a number from 1 to whatever the last least important one is, ranking them from most important to least important. And if you have trouble ranking one value versus another, you could ask yourself the following question. If you could have value A, but you couldn't have value B, would that be okay to you? That can help prioritize one value versus another. So just get those ranked by just simply putting a number next to each one from 1 to however many you have. Now what I'd like you to do is take your top 5 values and write them as a separate list with value 1 at the top, value 2 below it, value 3 below that, value 4, and value 5 as a separate list, values 1 through 5 for you. Now that you have your list of your top 5 values as it relates to your career, what I'd like you to do is keep that list handy, either in your wallet, in your purse, take a picture of it with your phone, whatever you can do to keep it handy, because the next time that you have an important decision to make as it relates to your career, make sure that decision is in alignment with your top 5 personal values. If it's not, I guarantee you will create unnecessary stress in your life because you are not being true to yourself. Okay? So make sure, don't do anything drastic without making sure that it's in alignment with your top 5 values. Next activity I like to call Remember the Lottery. And this is for those times where the alarm goes off in the morning. You shut the alarm off, and the first thing you think is, I don't want to get out of bed. So I want to change your perspective a little bit here. Today, there's approximately 7 billion people on Earth. And there's been approximately 115 billion people who have ever lived on Earth in the history of the world. That means approximately 108 billion people, 14 out of 15 roughly, are dead. The fact that you woke up this morning means you have already won the lottery. This also goes for finances, which is obviously a big stressor for a lot of people. The average world income is $5,000 US per year. If you're higher than that, you are in the top 50% of the world's income earners. And if you're lucky enough to make $50,000 or more per year, you are in the top 0.5% of the world's income earners. You already have more than almost everybody else on the planet, and you have already won the lottery. And if either of those don't snap you out of that doldrums, and you're still got that pity me mode, ask yourself the following question and truly and honestly answer it. Is there anyone else in the world having it worse than me right now? Is there anyone else in the world having it worse than me right now? Chances are you can think of somebody else who's having it worse. It's all about having gratitude for what you have. And it starts with remembering that you've already won the lottery. Next activity is random acts of kindness. And it's amazing how a simple message saying that you were thinking of someone works wonders for relieving stress, not only for the other person, but for you as well. A great habit to get into is at the start of each day, take 1 minute to write an email or send a text thanking someone or praising someone, for something that they did, or letting them know that you were just thinking of them. But here's the caveat. Don't expect a response from that recipient. If you set expectations, you set yourself up for disappointment. Instead, send the thank you note just because you want to. And if you do get a response, consider it the cherry on top of your ice cream sundae and enjoy a jolt of positive energy. It just takes 1 minute a day. Random act of kindness. The last activity I'd like to take you through is called Hakalau. And Hakalau is a light meditation that comes from the Hawaiian culture, and it's suited for calming you right before a stressful event. So maybe you have to give an important presentation, or you have to have a difficult conversation with someone. So right before you have to do that, what you do is you can do this Hakalau meditation. So follow me. What you do is you pick a spot to focus on in your room, preferably above eye level. And you start to stare at this spot. And as you stare at this spot, just let your mind go loose and focus all of your attention on that spot. Notice that within a matter of moments, your vision begins to spread out, and you see more in the peripheral than you do in the central part of your vision. Now pay attention to the peripheral. In fact, pay more attention to the peripheral than the central part of your vision. And you want to stay in this state for as long as you feel comfortable. And notice how it feels. Okay, go ahead and close your eyes, open them back up, come back into the room, and notice that you're more calm and more aware of your surroundings. And if you use this technique, you'll be better grounded to take on whatever stressful event you've got coming up. It's all called Hakalau. So I want to wrap up the two stories that I started with, and then we'll open it up for questions. And if you recall my friend Ken, who ended up in the emergency room with intestinal cancer, and he had to have over 2/3 of his intestines removed, and then he had to undergo chemotherapy. And on many, many occasions, Ken told me he was absolutely convinced that stress caused his cancer. 2 weeks before his 49th birthday, and not long after this picture was taken, Ken passed away because of his disease. Stress got the best of him. As for me, lying in that ICU bed was an epiphany moment for me. I knew that I needed to change what I was doing, or else I wasn't going to be around much longer. And so what I did was I started applying different stress relief tools and techniques, including all the ones that we did today. And I noticed that not only did my stress go down, my glucose numbers as a diabetic went down, my weight went down, and my energy went way, way up. It was as if I had discovered the fountain of youth. And I knew that I needed to share this with all of my peers, my friends, my family. And my mission now is to educate other professionals like yourself how to tackle stress head on. Because I believe you can reach your full potential if you can get a handle on your stress. And thank you. I'm going to put in the activities here in the chat announcements area so that you can practice these on your own. And I will open up for questions, Michael.
Great, thank you, Pete. Audience members, want to remind everybody to ask a question today. You can go ahead and click on the Q&A tab at the top of your screen. Once you're there, go ahead, type your question into the box. Don't forget to hit the submit button when you do so. We had just a couple comments. Somebody says they're sorry for your loss, Pete. And I think we have a couple of those comments, so we're sending you thoughts and prayers.
Thank you.
Of course. Right here. All right, perfect. So we had somebody ask, I use yoga to help reduce stress. Do you also try that?
Yes, yoga is a great example because it allows you to stretch your body. You don't have to exert it in a challenging way. And absolutely, I think it's a wonderful way. Each person, if they can find something that works for them, and yoga is a great one. I know people who actually do meditation yoga, so they combine meditation with yoga. So if it works for you, it's a great stress reliever, and it's great for the body because it keeps your body flexible.
Great, thank you. Our next question here says, how does the effect of stress in the U.S. compare its effects in other developed countries?
It's interesting. That's a great question. The the challenge with this is that we make assumptions about other countries. And when I was doing my research, one of the countries that I thought must be very stressed would be Japan. And what's interesting is that, yes, there's a lot of stress there, but it's how it's handled. In the U.S., as a basically a developed country, one of the things that causes us more stress is the fact that we have limited vacation. And in other westernized countries, the vacation is 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and that allows people to recharge. Unfortunately, in the U.S., the typical vacation time that we get is 2 weeks, and so and many of us feel like, oh, we can't take that time off because we either have too much to do or we're worried that the work will back up. And it really is important to take that vacation time. And even if you're not taking a vacation, here in the U.S., we are terrible about being connected to our technology 24 hours a day. So if you think about it, if you're checking your messages in the evenings, especially your work messages, but messages in general, if you're checking those in the evening, on the weekend, on your vacation, if you take a vacation, you effectively haven't stopped working. And when you haven't stopped working, you don't give your mind or your body the opportunity to recharge. And that's the part where the U.S., from a comparison standpoint, we are really bad about disconnecting. Unlike most of the other westernized countries, when they have their time off, they take the time off.
Great, thank you. Just a comment here as well. Somebody said, I found by listening today the stress was affecting me. The exercises you had us do felt very good. I felt a sense of relief, so thank you.
Oh, I'm glad that you got benefit from it. Thank you for that feedback.
We had another question here. It says, can you go over the world income information once again?
Sure. So the average world income is approximately $5,000 US. So if you make, let's just say $5,001 a year, you are in the top 50% of the world's income earners because the average is $5,000. If you make, or if you're lucky enough to make $50,000 a year, that means you are in the top 0.5% of the world's income earners. It's amazing if you think about that, because here in the U.S., $50,000 may not seem like a lot, but compared to the world income, it is a lot. And that, if you get into that mindset that you really have more money than you might realize, hopefully you start having some gratitude with that, because it's all about having gratitude for what you have. When you have gratitude for the simple things, let's say, I talked about the, waking up in the morning, the fact that you're alive. Maybe it could be that it's a nice day and you had an opportunity to take a walk, or you had something you really liked for a meal. Not doesn't have to be something really big, but if you start getting into this mode that you're grateful, it has an amazing effect on your overall mindset, and it takes you from being in this lack of, I don't have enough money, to, hey, I've got money. And, when you start projecting that positive energy, you attract back positive energy. Same thing happens when you project negative energy. You are going to attract back negative energy. So having a I hate to use the term attitude of gratitude, but it really is, having this gratitude for what you have really can snap you out of, if you get into that little bit of that pity mode, which can easily be done if you're feeling sorry for yourself.
Great, thank you. Another question here says, can you repeat what fear stands for again?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Fictional evidence appearing real. Fictional evidence appearing real. Just remember that most of our stress is self-induced. We do it to ourselves. And chances are that stress where you're doing it to yourself is based on some sort of fear.
Great, thank you. Our next question here says, do you or can you incorporate Reiki with this practice? Reiki?
Oh, yeah. Reiki? Absolutely. So Reiki's, a form of energy work. And so, yes, absolutely. It's something where if you have someone who is a Reiki master, absolutely. You can work that, incorporate that. That might be your stress relief technique. You might just be taught something from your Reiki master that will give you that stress relief. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Our next question here says, in the middle of a call for work, notice stress or situation going stressful. Are there quick ways to ground without leaving your work or your desk?
Yes. So that's a very, very good question. So you could, it's very purposeful, what I did on these activities, that I started with the visualization exercise and I ended with the Hakulau exercise, because both of those are designed to do just that. If you feel like your blood is starting to boil because you're on a conference call or somebody says something, and it's like, if you can just take a moment, 30 seconds, a minute, and practice one of those two activities, that is very, very, very powerful. Because when you react in the moment, how often, if it's something where you're just really agitated, you regret something that you say. So this gives you an opportunity to ground yourself and not react in the moment. And it does keep you much more calm with both of those activities. Another one that I like to use is called the stop method. And the stop method is you're about ready to respond and you stop yourself from doing that. What you do is you take time and think about what the situation is. You observe your reaction to it, and then you proceed to respond once you've had a chance to just collect your thoughts. It's all designed so that you don't regret saying something in the heat of the battle, let's say.
Great, thank you. Our next one here says, do you think employers will ever realize how important vacation time is for employees?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I would say the enlightened organizations are the ones that they tell the employee that you can only accrue a certain amount of vacation time, maybe it's 6 weeks, 8 weeks, before you can't accrue anymore. And I know that that's the intent of that. The intent of that is to make sure you take the vacation. However, a lot of people who are workaholics, they may say, okay, fine, I'll take that vacation, but they sit at home and they actually are still working, even though they're not supposed to be. So I really believe that this is something that not only from an organizational standpoint, but from a manager standpoint, a supervisor, that supervisor should really make sure that their people take the vacation and don't, and call them out one-on-one. Call them out if they start responding to messages when they're supposed to be on vacation. Tell them, hey, you're supposed to be on vacation. Don't want you to be answering these. But it's, to say that it's going to happen on across the board, I don't think so. I think where the companies that are more adept at realizing how important vacation is because they realize how expensive it is to replace key employees who burn out. Because when an employee, you have this invested time, training, and the expertise that person has within the organization. And when that person leaves because they're burned out and they're not coming back, well, now you have to have the cost of recruiting. You have the cost of training and getting that person ramped up. There is an enormous amount of cost involved that walks out the door when somebody burns out. And so, unfortunately, with what I have to do is I work with managers and supervisors who say, yeah, I don't want to lose my team. So, but an organization as a whole, it's on a case by case basis, and I wish they would all be enlightened, but it's like I'm having to do it one organization at a time.
Thank you. Our next question here says, are we striving too much for productivity? And if so, what will it take to change the psyche in the U.S. to preserve our health in an effective way?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Well, I would say that there's a little bit of education that needs to happen. And that's in the fact that there actually is good stress and bad stress first. So good stress, it's also called eustress, EUSTRESS. And eustress is the kind of stress that we need in order to get a project done. So imagine if you're very happy at work and you need to meet a deadline. That's the kind of stress that's okay because it's not affecting us negatively, because we do need something to keep us motivated. However, the negative stress is where it's problematic. And if people can be educated on what the negative stress is, and this really falls into two primary categories. One is called rumination. And rumination is negative stress that comes from worrying about something in your past. So you think back and you're just beating yourself up and you've got guilt about something you said, something you did or didn't do with someone or at your work, whatever it happens to be. When you beat yourself up and ruminate about that something in the past that you cannot change, all it's going to do is eat you up inside. And then there's also the anxiety of something in a future event. This goes back to the fear that I was talking about earlier. When we're fearful and we're anxious about something in the future, we just start twisting ourselves in horrible knots. So if there is education to employees to help them realize that what you really need to minimize as much as possible is the rumination and the anxiety, I think that then the productivity will still happen because there is, as I said, there's good stress to help you get your stuff done. But you need to avoid that negative stress. And so if an organization can help employees avoid the rumination and anxiety, I think that they can still get that productivity that they're looking for, and the employees can stay healthy.
Great, thank you. Our next question here says, what is the most stress-reducing yoga that you do?
That's a great question. Let me answer that question about what's some of my favorite activities that I do, because I personally, I do stretching for my shoulder, kind of yoga poses for my shoulder, because I had a ladder injury 7 months ago, and so my physical therapy tells me that I have to continue to do that. I don't do yoga specifically because I do meditation and I go for long walks in nature. So that's my way of kind of having meditation and being in nature and connecting with the outside. So I don't have a favorite yoga to recommend, but what I also do, I talked about the gratitude, and I find that one thing that works wonderful for me and my wife is we actually have a gratitude exercise in the evening before we go to bed. And we ask each other, what are we grateful for today? And we just list out simple things that happened during the day. It's a great recap. And we also integrate transcendental meditation. So we do that twice a day. That's a very popular meditation technique that a lot of famous people use. And I found that one was really good for me because I used to have difficulty meditating on my own because I would, the perfectionist in me would try and do it perfect. And where TM, what it does is it just has you realize that if your mind goes off wandering in a different direction, it's okay. Just bring it back and don't beat yourself up. So that one's a really good one. But I would just say, if you can get regular exercise, even if it's taking a micro break, especially if you tend to be working really focused on a particular project and you're sitting at your desk, get up, and not just to go to the bathroom. Get up and walk around. Take a walk around the block. Just take a walk around if you're on a floor of a office building or in a hospital, whatever it happens to be. Just take a walk. Get away from the computer, not just to go to the bathroom or to grab a bite to eat. It's really important to do that every hour if you can, because you put your body into so much strain by just sitting at your desk and working without taking a breather.
Thank you. Our next one here says, for one of my stress relievers, I take random Fridays off for long 3-day weekends rather than a typical full week. This helps me get through stress of work. Do you think this is just as good as a whole week?
Yes, it can be just as good as a whole week as long as you detox from the technology. Get away. Do not check any work messages. Be present with what you want to do. So if you're getting away for the weekend, if you're doing what they call it, a staycation, where you stay at home, or you're going out, you're going camping, or you're going to somewhere for the weekend, an Airbnb, let's say, stuff. Be present with that. Don't think about work. If you do that, it's absolutely as good as a week. But if you you continue to think about work during the weekend, it's not long enough. Or if you check messages on the weekend, absolutely, it's not long enough.
And audience members, we have a couple more minutes here, so if you do have any final questions here for Pete, make sure that you do get them into the Q&A box. And then, again, don't forget to hit that submit button. Our next question here says, what would you suggest for someone working in customer service who's answering phones all day, every day in a hospital setting to help them relieve or reduce their stress?
Oh, that's a great one, because I can only imagine the kind of stuff that you get. So what I can do is I can put this, because it's a little hard to explain without seeing it, but there's a forgiveness activity that you probably need to do on a daily basis. And what I mean by that is, if there's someone on that phone who affected you negatively, you don't want to keep carrying that with you, because that's just going to weigh you down and add stress to your day. So what I like to do is you do a forgiveness activity at the end of the day, or if it was a really bad one, you could just do it right after this interaction. But the technique is designed to have you in your mind imagine the person you just interacted with, or earlier in the day interacted with, and you do a forgiveness activity where you imagine yourself looking at that person in the eyes. Even if you don't know what they look like, you can just imagine it. And you can say, I forgive you. Please forgive me too. And it's amazing, if you do this regularly, how much that can help you with any interaction that you had with a particular person who it's just bothering you. You do this regularly, and it kind of goes, it just fades away, the negativity. So what I'll do is I'll put that as another link so that people have that, and you can do that activity. There's a recording, a 7-minute recording that you listen to, and it's basically a meditation that helps walk you through that. I would highly recommend that for a solution.
Great, thanks, Pete. Another question here says, if you disconnect completely from technology, when you return by being off for a full week, when you come back, the stress when you come back is tenfold. So how do you find the balance between that?
Okay, so depending on, because I see this a lot, I experience this a lot, so I have a huge appreciation for it. What I would recommend, and this is, you just have to be willing to do this. If you get, like I remember, I used to get on a regular day, and I still do in many respects, over 100 emails a day. And so you take a week off, and so let's say it's 7 days, maybe 9 days if you've got both weekends involved. It could be upwards of 1,000 messages. So there's really a great way to do something to remove a lot of that stress, and that's what I call email purge. And you think about who is it that's absolutely most important for you to respond to. So is that your supervisor? Maybe that's a certain employee of yours, a peer, whatever it happens to be. Those are your priority messages, and you filter in your inbox those people. And here's what you have to do with the rest. You hit delete on all, let's say, 900 other messages. I know that you're thinking, oh my God, I can't do that. Well, here's the fact. If something was really important and needed to be responded to while you were out, guess what? There's probably a 95% chance that whatever that was, it's been taken care of already. And you were just copied on it, and it's just in your inbox, and you're wasting a lot of time trying to follow up on stuff that doesn't need to be followed up with. If something is really important and it wasn't handled, they'll come back to you when you're back in the office. They'll come back to you and send you another message. You don't have to worry about that. Does that make sense?
Great, thank you, Pete. I think we have time here for one last question. Somebody says, for a negative encounter can be offset by having 3 positive interactions to get back to where you were before the negative encounter. I got this from a great book called the No A-Hole Rule Book. This works for me. What do you think of that way to handle these?
I think so. First of all, it works for you, then keep using it. Absolutely. Because there are, what works for me may not work for you, Michael, and vice versa. So whenever you find an activity that actually works, I absolutely say use it. Keep using it, keep using it, keep using it. From a practicality standpoint, I would imagine that works wonders as long as the negative activity is on the same emotional level as 3 positive activities. But I don't know whether or not for me personally, whether or not that would work strongly for me if it was a very negative encounter. And, we've all had ones where we can think of, oh my gosh, that was horrible. And if the positive things are more light, I don't know whether or not that would overcome that for me. But bottom line, if that activity works for you, I strongly encourage keeping on using it. It's all about finding that 1 or 2 things that work for you, and then you just keep applying it as you need it, because you'll see long term your stress will definitely go down.
Great, thanks, Pete. One thing for me, I know when I get emails, maybe an angry email or a stressful email, I tell everybody, try to read it like you're reading it from Mickey Mouse. That's what I like to do. It helps me not get so stressed out from that email. Read it in a happy voice. So
It could be. Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, and it's funny too because that's it's using humor. And one thing that I've used a lot is laughter because you know what's interesting is that we get this positive endorphins from laughter, and it's a natural stress reliever. It's also it improves your health. But the crazy thing is, you don't have to have like a funny video or a joke to laugh at. If you can just get into the habit of just force laughing, even for 20 to 30 seconds, you will get those positive endorphins because the crazy thing is our body doesn't know the difference between a real and a forced laugh. It only knows that we're laughing and it goes ahead and excretes those positive endorphins. So I wholly encourage that, Michael. Anytime you can get something to lighten the the mood, and laughter is a great way to do that.
Well, Pete, unfortunately, we're out of time. I think we could have lots of questions here. We could probably go on for another hour, but unfortunately, audience members, that is all the time that we have for today. Audience members, you should see a survey live on your screen, and we do ask that you take a moment to fill out this survey, as it does help AAHAM improve and gives feedback, obviously, for today's presentation as well. Again, we'd like to give Pete a big thank you, a big shout out for today's excellent presentations. And audience members, again, if you would like any of those links, they are under the announcement section there. So feel free to go in there and grab those links and save them to your browser. Thank you again, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.